Octavia Thurina Minor, known as Octavia the Younger, was born in the town of Nola around 66 BC. Her father was Gaius Octavius, cognominated Thurinus for his success in putting down a rebellion of rogue slaves who had escaped being slaughtered along with Spartacus's forces in Thurii. Octavia's mother was Attia Balba Caesonia, the second of 3 daughters, all named Attia, born to the sister of Julius Caesar. From her father's first marriage, Octavia had an elder half-sister by the same name, commonly referred to as Octavia the Elder. By the time of Octavia the Younger's birth, her half-sister was already out of the house, married and mother to a 4-year-old son named Sextus Apuleius. When Octavia was approximately 3 years old, her mother gave birth to her younger brother, Gaius Octavius. In 59 BC, while journeying from Macedonia, where he was pro-praetor, to stand for the 58 BC consular elections in Rome, Octavia the Younger's father, Octavius Thurinus, had fallen ill. In the same villa in the town of Nola, where the now 7-year-old Octavia had been born, her father passed away. Because her mother's uncle Julius Caesar had been elected to his first consulship in that same year, while also serving as Rome's Pontifex Maximus, Octavia's mother, along with the other women in Caesar's family, was suddenly sought after as brides. The man who soon married Octavia the Younger's mother was Lucius Marcius Philippus, a politically savvy stepfather well able to negotiate the futures of Attia Balba Caesonia's children. Philippus belonged to Rome's conservative faction, which included men such as Lucius Licinius Lucullus, Marcus Porcius Cato, Marcus Calpurnius Bibulus, Metellus Scipio, and Marcus Tullius Cicero, all political opponents of the reformist party dominated by Julius Caesar. Sometime around 54 BC, the 12 or 13-year-old Octavia was given in marriage to Gaius Claudius Marcellus, another political opponent of Caesar's. Marcellus belonged to one of the 3 illustrious branches of the Claudii and was a direct descendant of the Claudius Marcellus who had held the consulship an unprecedented 5 times between 222 and 208 BC. Immediately following Octavia's marriage to Gaius Claudius Marcellus, Julius Caesar's daughter died unexpectedly as she fought to bring a child into the world for the famed general Pompeius Magnus, who was Caesar's ally. Fearing he'd lose Pompeius as an ally, Caesar pressured Octavia to divorce Marcellus so that she could marry Pompeius. Octavia and Marcellus, however, refused to divorce, and Pompeius Magnus instead married the daughter of Metellus Scipio, a member of the conservative faction. This marriage severed Pompeius's alliance with Octavia's great-uncle Caesar and ultimately led Rome down the path towards civil war. When it came to pass that Caesar crossed the Rubicon River and Pompeius Magnus and his supporters fled to Greece to raise legions, Octavia's husband remained in Rome. Although he was a political opponent of Caesar's, Marcellus chose not to take up arms against his wife's great-uncle. After the defeat of Pompeius Magnus at the Battle of Pharsalus, Caesar pardoned Gaius Claudius Marcellus, and he and Octavia continued to live their lives in Rome. After the assassination of Caesar, and with the public recitation of Caesar's last will and testament by Marcus Antonius, the startling revelation about Octavia's younger brother was unveiled. Gaius Octavius had been named as Julius Caesar's primary heir and had been posthumously adopted by the late dictator. Within 10 days of Caesar's death, Octavia's 19-year-old brother had landed in Brundisium. There, both the city and Caesar's legions declared their allegiance, and Octavius began marching to Rome to lay claim to his inheritance. Although Octavia's mother, Attia, was quick to refer to Gaius Octavius as Caesar, Philippus, her stepfather, refused to participate. He worried that the boy was no match for ruthless men like Marcus Antonius, who played what he knew to be a dangerous game. Yet, by 40 BC, with the defeat of the liberators at Philippi and his vengeance against Caesar's assassins complete, Octavia's brother, who now referred to himself as the Son of the Divine, had proven himself equal to the task, ruthless men like Marcus Antonius notwithstanding. Octavia's brother, however, was not the only entity to amass power. From the time of Rome's third founder, Gaius Marius, and his creation of the first-ever professional army, loyal to gold, through the rise of the glorious generals Pompeius Magnus and Gaius Julius Caesar, who continued empowering the legions by ensuring that gold always flowed, Along with lands and fame, Rome's military had become a power all its own. The legions now had a say in whom to follow. No longer were Rome's soldiers commanded to live or die on the whims of whichever aristocrat had bribed his way to the consulship. And so, with half of Rome's legions sailing to Brundisium behind Marcus Antonius and half marching behind Caesar and Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, the centurions came to a decision. There would be no war. The current state of affairs was nothing more than an out-of-control argument between Caesarian commanders. Why should Caesarian legions fight and die just so that one commander could gain ascendancy over the other? Both generals needed to learn that their power to command hinged on the consent of those who did the brunt of the fighting and dying. Forced into the Treaty of Brundisium, Octavia's brother and Marcus Antonius re-established their respective areas of rule within the Roman territories, leaving Marcus Aemilius Lepidus's territorial authority unchanged. With the requisite Roman marriage alliance needed to seal the deal between the triumvirs, but with Antonius's daughter already betrothed to the son of Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, and Caesar newly married to Scribonia Libo, only Marcus Antonius, whose wife Fulvia had recently died, was available for a marriage. The handwriting was on the wall as all eyes looked to Octavia. When the Treaty of Brundisium had been established in September of the 40 BC year, Octavia was freshly widowed, her husband, Gaius Claudius Marcellus, having died in May. During their 16-year marriage, Octavia had given Marcellus 2 children, a girl named Claudia Marcella and a boy named Marcus Claudius Marcellus. At the time of her husband's death, Octavia was pregnant with their 3rd child. Because Octavia was only 4 months into her mourning period, and the Senate was anxious to formalize the Treaty of Brundisium before Marcus Antonius and Caesar Divi Filius could find something else to fight about, special legislation was adopted which allowed Octavia to marry during her time of mourning, provided there were no paternity disputes relating to her unborn child. With the Senate in full agreement, Marcus Antonius was offered the sister of Caesar Divi Filius. All at once, Octavia Thurina became the most important woman in Rome. The legions, the Senate, and even the Roman people looked to her to hold together a fragile alliance meant to contain 2 men so suspicious of one another that they threatened to drag Rome down into yet another bloody civil war. We do not know what factors motivated her decision, but Octavia agreed to marry Marcus Antonius, an impetuous man with a reputation for riotous and hedonistic living, who had a mistress named Glaphyra in Cappadocia, and who had fathered twin children with Egypt's Queen Cleopatra. But perhaps most alarming was the fact that his previous wife had died suddenly after being visited by her husband. Might a Roman woman feel compelled to marry for the peace of her nation, and her conscience be forever burdened if she did not, as when in her past she had refused to wed Pompeius Magnus, only to witness her country's descent into the most horrific of civil wars? From Brundisium, following Octavia's acquiescence, Caesar Divi Filius, Marcus Antonius, and Marcus Aemilius Lepidus all journeyed to Rome. In October, to the delight of the Roman people, the wedding vows between Antonius and a heavily pregnant Octavia were exchanged. In attendance were senators, centurions, and anyone with clout. The marriage was a symbolic gesture, reassuring Rome that civil war had been averted. Sometime within the next month, Octavia gave birth to her late husband's 3rd child, a daughter whom she named Claudia Marcella in his honor. The beginning of 39 BC found Octavia's new husband anxious to return to the east. Parthia's Prince Pacorus, assisted by Labienus Parthicus, was busy invading Rome's eastern provinces. Syria, Judea, Sidon, and southern Anatolia had already fallen. And although Antonius had ordered one of his generals, Publius Ventidius, to defend the east in his absence, the triumvir was restless to leave Rome. But he could not leave until he assisted his new brother-in-law, Caesar Divi Filius, against Sextus Pompeius's blockade of Italy. The triumvirs invited Sextus Pompeius to a meeting in Misenum, hoping to negotiate an end to Italy's starvation by discovering just what it was the son of Neptune actually wanted. Sextus Pompeius, however, did not trust the triumvirs. He had been on the ship in Alexandria when his father, Pompeius Magnus, after being rowed ashore by the advisors of King Ptolemy XIII, had been stabbed multiple times. Sextus had watched, horrified, as his father's head and hands were cut off, his lifeless corpse thrown unceremoniously onto the beach. Sextus had no intention of taking the bait and falling prey to the same circumstances. In order to meet in person, he demanded that 2 floating docks be constructed, separated from one another by enough distance that the parties had to shout to be heard. Agreeing to his request, the floating docks were built. With Pompeius and his advisers standing on one dock and the triumvirs standing on the other, Pompeius voiced his demands. Among many concessions, the son of Neptune desired to replace Marcus Aemilius Lepidus as the 3rd triumvir. Although the triumvirs immediately rejected this request, they found enough common ground with Sextus Pompeius to negotiate a deal. In exchange for Sextus Pompeius lifting his naval blockade of Italy and allowing grain to reach the mainland, Caesar Divi Filius conceded to the son of Neptune his claims to Sicily, Sardinia, and Corsica, and Marcus Antonius gave up southern Greece. Sextus Pompeius was also promised a future augurship as well as a future consulship, which he would serve in 4 years' time. But the most important concession marking this meeting, which history calls the Treaty of Misenum, was the triumvirs' agreement to end the proscriptions. No longer would one's political affiliation be considered a crime, nor would his wealth make him a target. Those who had fled the proscriptions were now free to return to Rome, where they could apply for compensation for what they had lost. As Romans began flooding back into Italy in early 39 BC, Octavia Thurina, who was now carrying Antonius's child, packed up her other 3 children and journeyed to her new husband's mansion in Athens. There, Octavia became mother to the children of Antonius's previous marriages, to include Antonia, daughter of his first wife, and Antulus and Iulus, his sons by Fulvia. It is also possible that Octavia became mother to Publius Clodius Pulcher, Claudia Pulchra, and Gaius Scribonius Curio, Fulvia's children from marriages to 2 husbands who had predeceased her. At last, grain began to flow again to Italy, easing the endless suffering of famine. The Treaty of Brundisium, mercifully, had put a halt to the bloodshed of another civil war, and the Treaty of Misenum had finally effected an end to the Second Triumvirate's bloody and violent proscriptions, as well as a return of exiled Romans to their forsaken homes. Seeing all of these welcome events as closely tied to the politically motivated marriage of Octavia Thurina and Marcus Antonius, the Roman people, the Senate, and the legions would have viewed their marital union as a good omen. Now, the First Lady of Rome had only to keep it all from falling apart again.